WLNS is here for you with 6 News at 5:30.
Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Siobhan Klepfer. Let's start the clock on our first 6 minutes of news. And tonight it appears there is a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas. The agreement has been confirmed by the White House and Qatar. The devastating 15-month war has killed around 46,000 Palestinians and more than 1,700 Israelis. The deal still needs final approval by lawmakers in Israel. Now, the agreement would roll out over several weeks, Hamas handing over hostages and Israel releasing prisoners back and forth. At least 7 Americans are believed to be held by Hamas. President Joe Biden says he's thankful a deal was struck before he left office. And the news comes just a few hours before President Biden is set to give his farewell speech to the nation. That speech will happen in prime time at 8 p.m. right here on WLNS. President Biden is leaving the White House after 4 years with a complex legacy where he dropped out of the presidential race, stepping aside for Kamala Harris, who ended up losing to Donald Trump. He's expected to reflect on how his administration started during the COVID pandemic and right after President-elect Trump's supporters stormed the Capitol building. Donald Trump is set to take the oath of office on Monday in Washington, D.C. South Korea's impeached president is at a detention center tonight. Yoon Suk-yeol was detained at the presidential compound earlier today after declaring martial law on December 3rd. High-ranking officials said Yoon was brought into custody about 5 hours after investigators arrived at his home. Yoon is insisting his opponents do not have the authority to investigate his actions, but said he complied to prevent any possible violence. Yoon faces the prospect of a lengthy prison term over potential rebellion charges. Well, the FDA is considering a ban on an artificial food dye over possible links to cancer and other health concerns. We're talking about red number 3 dye, which food companies use to color food items such as candies and drinks. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder discussed this controversial additive that food safety advocates have urged the FDA for decades to outlaw.
So red dye number 3 is made out of petroleum. It's what gives that bright cherry red color to a lot of foods, candies, etc. What are some of the health concerns? There seems to be an increased risk, at least in rats, of thyroid cancer. We also see an association with hyperactivity in kids. This has been banned in cosmetics and topical medications since 1990. It is still in food and medications you take by mouth.
So you can't put it on your skin, but you can ingest it?
Which is really bizarre, right?
CBS News asked some red dye number 3 manufacturers for comment, but did not receive any response. In 2027, California will be the first state to restrict the number of red dye number 3 in foods. The FDA is expected to act in the next several weeks. And the FDA is also proposing a new rule that would limit nicotine levels in cigarettes and other tobacco products. The health organization says the move aims to force the nearly 12% of Americans still smoking to switch to less dangerous alternatives like vaping electronic cigarettes or using nicotine lozenges, or quit altogether. If the rule is finalized, the U.S. would be the first country to impose such a limit. Craft retailer JOANN has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's the second time the company has done so in a year. The filing today comes after JOANN moved to close several of its locations around the nation. Despite these closures, the company announced all of its stores will remain open during the process, and online shopping will also be available. JOANN previously filed for bankruptcy in 2024, citing issues with increasing interest rates and decreasing sales after a spike during the COVID-19 lockdown. A man in Pennsylvania is in the middle of a legal fight after setting up a roller coaster in his backyard. Michael Chorba has a yard full of refurbished amusement park rides for his grandkids to enjoy. He has a large property in Millville, Pennsylvania, but his most recent addition, a mini roller coaster, and Chorba owns the land where that ride sits, but it's zoned as agricultural, putting it in violation of local laws.
Ultimately, if it fails, they would fine me, and at that point I would have to, disassemble and try to find a new buyer for the coaster.
Appeal was filed in the summer. The township is waiting on a court order before holding a second hearing. The community has rallied around him, even creating a Facebook group called Save Pappy's Roller Coaster. Dramatic drone footage tonight catches an ice rescue in Massachusetts. Crews were able to rescue a man and his dog who had both fallen through the ice. In a video posted on the police department's social media, you can see them crawling along a tether line toward a hole in the ice next to an empty rowboat. The man was then pulled to safety, and a short time later, his dog was also pulled out of that freezing water. Well, it is being called a 2-for-1 moonshot. SpaceX launched a pair of lunar landers today.
1, ignition, and liftoff. Go Firefly, go iSpace, go Falcon.
The two landers rocketed away in the middle of the night from NASA's Kennedy Space Center, the latest in a stream of private spacecraft aiming for the moon. They shared the ride to save money, taking separate roundabout routes for the months-long journey. One of the rovers will gather up lunar dust and dirt for study and plans to test potential food and water sources for future missions. Well, the hype surrounding the Detroit Lions continue to grow tonight, and now they are crisscrossing the state to rally up their fans, including a stop here in the capital city. The We Want More tour is coming to Lansing. The Detroit Lions are touring around the state to amp up fans for the upcoming game against the Washington Commanders. That game will be played at Ford Field Saturday night. Tomorrow, the Hype Bus will stop at the Capitol building from 3 until 5 and then head to Harrison Roadhouse in East Lansing from 6:30 until 9:30. It's being called a unique fan experience with plenty of giveaways. Kendall, I want to go. That sounds like fun.
I was just going to say, as if a hype tour wasn't enough, now you have the giveaways and everything added on too. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a lot of fun there.
Yeah, I'm thinking big crowds. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. All those people are going to be bundled up. Still going to be pretty cold tomorrow, but not as cold as what we're going to see early next week, Siobhan.
Okay, we'll take some relief while we can,
Yes.
but your full forecast right after the break with Kendall. And then later, radon is known to cause lung cancer over long-term exposure, but many people still do not check to see the levels in their own homes. So we'll tell you what you need to know coming up. Stay with us, that and much more still ahead.